Are you crying?
Yes.
The Marvel Cinematic Universe has captured our hearts on so many occasions, but they've also broke them just as often. Almost nobody does storytelling better than Marvel Studios. They make us feel for their characters because they're just so relatable and have real-world problems like the rest of us. While this is great, it also makes us feel all the feels when things go bad. So without further ado, let's get into the MCU scenes that made true fans cry. Iron Man's death. Avengers Endgame was one of the biggest cinematic events of all time, and a lot of it had to do with all the emotional scenes. Saying it was an emotional journey was an understatement, and Iron Man's death definitely takes the cake. Tony Stark was the character who kicked off the MCU all the way back in 2008. Iron Man paved the way for the MCU as we know it. In 2012's The Avengers, Tony made it clear that he's terrified of the fact that aliens can just fall from the sky and bring destruction everywhere they go. He later ended up facing his fears and taking on the big bad from outer space, the Mad Titan Thanos, with his fellow Avengers by his side in Infinity War and Endgame. His genius mind allowed him to perfect the device that allowed our heroes to travel through time in the quantum realm, and seeing as he started the MCU, it was fitting that Tony Stark put an end to the Infinity Saga with a snap of his fingers. While Thanos was inevitable, Tony Stark was Iron Man. We love you 3000. Black Widow's death. While it's typical of Tony Stark to hog the spotlight, Black Widow died in the movie too. Tony Stark even got his own funeral, but all Black Widow got was a short scene where our heroes quickly mourned her loss after they all came back from the quantum realm, and another short scene acknowledging her death during Tony's funeral. Luckily, we're going to be getting a Black Widow solo movie that's more than likely going to be a prequel, so we're not done with her just yet. Still, the fact that her death was glossed over is a bit of a disservice because her sacrifice was arguably just as important as Tony's. When she was sent to Vormir to retrieve the Soul Stone with Clint Barton, it quickly turned into a game of who was going to jump off the cliff first. Natasha Romanoff eventually won this game, if you could even call killing yourself winning, and Clint Barton woke up with the Soul Stone in his hands. If Nat didn't sacrifice herself, our heroes may not have gotten all 6 Infinity Stones. She put her life on the line for the Avengers time and time again, and motivated Earth's mightiest heroes to take down the Mad Titan once and for all. Cap and Peggy. Captain America and Peggy Carter have been through it all over the course of their time in the MCU. In Captain America: The First Avenger, we saw Peggy assist Steve Rogers in becoming the world's first superhero. But after getting to know him, she quickly fell in love with him, especially after he got injected with the super soldier serum because holy abs, Batman! Oh, sorry, wrong franchise. At the end of the movie, Captain America was forced to crash land Hydra's massive aircraft bomber into the Arctic. But before the crash, he and Peggy made plans for a date that they knew would never happen. When Steve's radio turned to nothing but static, we couldn't help but shed a tear. Or 2. Or 3. It was even more heartbreaking when Cap gets unfrozen and says, "I had a date." Luckily for him, at the end of Avengers Endgame, Steve went back in time to live his life with Peggy, and we got to see them share a dance in their home. As if that wasn't touching enough, we then saw an old and gray Rogers give his shield to Sam Wilson so he could become the next Captain America. It was all a little too much for us, and we couldn't control the waterworks. Ragnarok. Saying Thor has been through a lot in the MCU is putting it lightly. He lost his mother Frigga in Thor: The Dark World, which wasn't one of the best MCU entries if we're being honest. Those Shakespearean Thor movies were meh. Going into Thor Ragnarok, we knew it wouldn't be smooth sailing for Thor once again because, well, Ragnarok in Norse mythology is the event that brings the end of the world so a new world can resurface and begin anew. The movie itself was incredible, with Taika Waititi doing a fantastic job of reviving a declining franchise. But it wasn't a good time for Thor. Right before he died, Odin shared the fact that Thor and Loki had a sister, Hela, who was hell-bent on conquering everything in sight. Then Hela immediately showed up to break Thor's favorite toy, Mjolnir. If that wasn't enough, Thor had no choice but to see Asgard get destroyed by Surtur to fulfill the Ragnarok prophecy. At the beginning of Infinity War, we also saw Thanos take Loki down with ease. This means that Thor's mom, dad, brother, and home were all taken from him in the span of a few movies. That's enough to drive anyone to drink and play Fortnite all day. GROOT'S sacrifice. Guardians of the Galaxy is easily one of the best MCU films out there. We got to meet this band of intergalactic misfits that somehow find a way to mesh together and save the galaxy from cosmic threats. Even though they might not consider themselves heroes, they definitely are in our books. That being said, one Guardian stands out from the rest because of his incredible vocabulary of 3 words. Groot. Able to only say, "I'm Groot," this powerful tree person quickly became a fan favorite with Rocket as his translator for the rest of the group. While we learned that Groot has some amazing powers, he was typically shy and stayed close to Rocket. But even the shyest people can make friends. When it looked like the Guardians were facing certain death from a surface-bound ship on Xandar, Groot extended his arms and legs to create a bubble around the group. With one "We are Groot," which was a surprising change from his usual catchphrase, the lovable tree sacrificed his life for the group. Luckily, Rocket found a piece of him on the ground that grew to become Baby Groot, and then Teen Groot, and soon Young Adult Groot. He definitely won't enjoy being Adult Groot, though. KILLMONGER'S death. The MCU's 2018 film lineup was as solid as it got, and Black Panther was a big reason for that, mainly due to one of the most compelling villains in MCU history, Killmonger. Not only did Killmonger have plenty of swag, as we saw in his first scene in the museum, but he also had some great ideas, even if he went about them in a terrible, no-good, awful way. He wanted to claim the throne of Wakanda and make the secret country go public so the world could make use of their advanced technology, but went about it by killing anyone and anything standing in his way, no matter the cost. In the final battle between Killmonger and T'Challa, the fight ends with Killmonger getting stabbed in the chest. T'Challa offers to heal his cousin, who no doubt could have recovered with all the advanced tech in Wakanda. But he declined and said, "Bury me in the ocean with my ancestors that jumped from ships because they knew death was better than bondage." That was an epic final line for one of the MCU's most epic villains. Spider-Sense. This next entry is going to talk about some Spider-Man Far From Home spoilers, so if you've seen the movie, stick around, but if you haven't, we'd recommend skipping to the next entry. From the trailers, it was pretty easy to assume that Peter Parker was having trouble coming to terms with the loss of Tony Stark. It was also clear that he wanted to get away from the superhero life altogether, even if it was just for a few weeks with his classmates in Europe, but that obviously didn't happen. What was surprising in the film was how Aunt May was completely fine with Peter Parker being Spider-Man. In fact, she was so used to him being Spider-Man that she'd throw things like a banana at Peter and just assume that he'd catch it with his spider sense. Or the Peter tingle, as she called it, but that's not always the case. Peter was so exhausted and mentally drained from everything that's been going on in his life that the banana just hit him in the face. It was a moment that brought a tear to our eye because it was clear that Peter wasn't in a good place and it was affecting his superhuman abilities. The ending of the film probably won't make things any easier for him. GAMORA'S death. These last few entries will all have to do with one of the most heartbreaking MCU movies, Avengers: Infinity War. We'll go in chronological order, starting with Gamora's death. Gamora has always been Thanos' favorite adopted daughter, but that doesn't mean he treats her nicely. He's still just as manipulative with her as he is with everyone else, but since he likes Gamora, he won't replace her body parts with cybernetic enhancements if she disappoints him. But as far as we know, she never has. We really feel sorry for Nebula. During Thanos' quest for the Infinity Stones, he winds up on Vormir and learns from Emperor Palpatine, the Red Skull, that the only way to get his hands on the Soul Stone is by yeeting someone he loves off a cliff. Does a supervillain ever truly love anything? Well, it turned out he loved Gamora in his own weird, demented way, which meant, that's right, she'd have to be chucked off that cliff. The things you do for Infinity Stones, huh? Later on in Infinity War, when Peter Quill learns about Gamora's fate, he completely ruined the plan to get the gauntlet off Thanos. The things you do for love, eh? We felt terrible for Star-Lord in that moment. Vision's death. Next up is Vision's death. Although Age of Ultron is often talked about as one of the weaker entries in the MCU, it gave us Vision, the souped-up version of Tony Stark's AI, Jarvis, but with a cape. He quickly became a fan favorite, but all good things have to come to an end at some point. With Thanos on the hunt for all 6 Infinity Stones, Vision knew his time was running out because, well, he has the Mind Stone exposed on his forehead at all times. He's literally a walking target for the Mad Titan. While his girlfriend, Wanda Maximoff, aka the Scarlet Witch, refused to take the Mind Stone out of his forehead and end his life, she eventually had no choice but to do so. And it was all for nothing. When Thanos came to town, he used the Time Stone to go back in time to when Vision still had the Mind Stone in his forehead and ripped it out himself. Now, Thanos had all the stones in his possession, and we all know what happened next. The Snap. Last but definitely not least, we have the Snap. Did you really expect anything else as the final entry? This is easily the most devastating moment in MCU history. We saw so many of our favorite characters turn to dust, all because one Mad Titan thought this was the best way to go about balancing the universe. Two scenes during the dusting really stood out for us. Of course, the first one involved Peter Parker and Tony Stark. These two have developed such an awesome dynamic throughout the years, with Tony Stark acting as both a mentor and a father figure to young Peter Parker. We honestly don't know if Tony would have been a dad if it weren't for Peter showing him that he had much better fatherly instincts than his dad Howard ever did. Hearing Peter Parker say, "Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good," hit us right in the feels. Even the scene where Groot turned to dust in front of Rocket was devastating. With one last feeble "I am Groot," we saw our favorite tree become dust in the wind, and we later learned from James Gunn, the director of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, that Groot's final words translated to "Dad." We're not crying. You're crying. We're just so happy they all came back. And those are just some of the MCU scenes that my true fans cry around the world. What do you think is the most heartbreaking scene in MCU history? Let us know in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe to CBR for more MCU videos. And thanks for watching.